the ways that we present storytelling, documentaries, right? You get one person alone in their bedroom, they're watching that, they're like, oh my God, I
Mm-hmm.
never thought of it that way. And then there are other ways that we curate stories, like through art. I think I think that is one thing in the beginning of my storytelling journey that I never considered that had an impact, but it absolutely does. Plays, television, books, poetry.
Mm.
It's like, oh, there are many avenues to this. So not only do we have the opportunity to use it in the way we highlight the human part of human services, but we have options. We can do it this way or that way,
Yes.
right? We have options. And so we are less restricted in the way that we usually are when we have these rules in place that are strict formalities and people get overlooked because we do it a certain way and we don't come back and check those procedures. I think that will soon change because it is more now a burden to follow certain rules than it is not to take in consideration how people are experiencing the services that they're provided. Right? Have you ever heard
Hmm.
meet people where they are?
Yes. Yes.
Isn't that like the first rule? It's like rule one, meet people where they are. Number two is like confidentiality. But I don't,
Hmm.
right? I don't know how that's possible if we are skipping over the part where we're really considering the human experience is the subjective part of a burden or an injustice, right? And it's
Yes.
funny. I just thought of this. For a country that is so hyper individualistic, how are we skipping over that consideration for the subjective view? What?
Well, you'd think for, people who are obsessed with giving Yelp reviews and telling companies, I don't like how this went, or I don't appreciate how, this is done. You'd think that that would be more of something that we are like happy to engage with.
Can you imagine a Yelp for human service professionals?
Oh my
I
gosh.
can, and I feel like it would be popping off. It would be just a hotbed because people that have a problem are the only ones that comment, right? And it's like,
Yep.
ooh, that would be really revealing, though. Like, okay, do y'all
It would
see?
be.
Like, we got a 1-star review, and this shouldn't be something that we're like. It's one thing to get a 1-star review as like maybe a business owner, right? Still bad, but a 1-star review providing services to a human being who's in need of that in order to proceed
Yeah.
with their own autonomy and fairness, like that's
Yeah, that's
heartbreaking,
a big deal. That's a big deal.
right? We're not just dealing with cards and consumerism and items and products. Like we are dealing
Hmm.
with people's lives. Hello,
Yeah,
right?
real people.
So, I want to come full circle and I want you to tell me your personal story. How in the world did Jade get here?
I think, I don't know, when I first started thinking about what I wanted to do, like for work in general, when you're a kid and you start fantasizing about having a job, I think like many kids thought about animals and, being a vet or a zoologist or owning a farm or working with animals in some way. And I think it's really connected to like you want to help things, people, animals, creatures, doing something good. And then I think I started my process of radicalization probably started somewhere in like middle high school ish, where I would think I was really in the dark. Like my family's pretty progressive, but I was just very much in the dark about what was going on in the world and the injustices. And when it was like one after another of like, here's all these bad things. And it started to get me thinking, and I think I did like some type of like volunteer, like required volunteer thing in high school. And it felt really good, which sounds like a little self serving. But it felt really good to be a part of something that really seemed like it was having a good impact on other people. And I realized like I can do something, I don't have to just be bummed. And I've I've tried to continue that, and that's why human services felt so natural to me. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to major in. I thought about sociology, psychology, anthropology, all of those kind of similar adjacent fields, and none of them felt like they quite fit. And when I heard about human services, it kind of clicked. It made sense to me. Working with people, for people, and the whole goal is just to try to make lives better in a way, in whatever way that means. um and what keeps me coming back is that despite the the bad news and the negative things that are happening, the people who are committing injustices, there's always something really wonderful happening too. And in conversations like through the podcast, through Dig Deeper, I got to hear about people's real accounts of the good that they were doing. And that like feeling of joy and positivity just like fills me up so much. And I think if I wasn't focusing on that aspect of human services, I would have a really hard time not burning out, and I'd have a hard time staying in this field. So that's why this particular aspect interests me so much. Um, like just replicating that positivity and making it happen again and again, and also just spreading information. I really am super passionate about education. And I think that this is a way to pull education into human services when a lot of people only think of it as being a direct service kind of job, which like I'll tell people, oh, I'm a human services major. First, they think it's human resources. They get confused. So I have to sort of explain. And then they're like, I don't think I could do that, because they're thinking about, of course, all of the really hard, tough work that human services professionals do, but they're not thinking about the wonderful positive outcomes and the good feelings that you can get from the job too.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I have to, on a personal caveat for a second. Do you want to know what I wanted to be when I was a senior in high school? I
I would
want,
love to know.
I wanted to be a zoologist. I want,
Yes. Oh my
yeah.
God. Yes.
I was so giddy when you said that. I'm like, oops, that was me. And I had the same intention. I didn't realize it then. But then freshman year of college, I like failed out of chemistry. I was like, oh my God. One achievement was tied to my identity at that point. When I failed and nothing bad happened, like the world didn't end, I was like, oh, okay. And then I just
I'm
started,
okay.
yeah, I'm okay. So then I just started studying things that I was interested in. I highlight my privilege in that. And eventually that led me to human
Of course.
services. It took me 4 years. And then I went back to school. I was like, okay, I got it. I got it at the end there. Let me try again. And, you know, in hindsight, I was like, yes, animals are amazing, very cool. But you get that, you can feel it in you when you connect with the possibility that you can serve and help others when meeting them where they are. Now, you mentioned something I find it's a very interesting kind of, is there an answer to this caveat in human services, and that's self-interest, right? I
Hmm.
I personally have not seen a situation wherein anything we do does not to some degree, even subconsciously, fulfill the self-interest of somebody or anyone, right? We all have our stories, which we review the work we do, in some respect, it is self-serving, but I, it, is that important, right? Like, is self-service and altruism maybe the same thing, mirroring facts in that regard? And I don't know, and maybe other viewers might be able to kind of comment on this, but I just don't know what the role it plays, other than highlighting the fact that you do get up and you do get to serve and help other people. But it's not like anybody gets up and they're like, I guess I'll go help other people. Like, I'm not really interested. It moves
Hmm.
you, right? It's something that it's like it's this or nada. So it's an interesting thing that I'm not sure is investigated much, and I'm not sure how important it is. But we'll leave that at that. I want to be able to like kind of hang the carrot out there for people to really consider. Like, is what I'm doing?
Totally. Think on it. Everyone think on that for a moment.
Right? Because personal growth, I think, is married to that self-serving interest. And, all right, let's take two steps back and disassociate negative connotations of self-interest from each other.
Totally.
Right? Some self-interest is like the betterment of yourself in a personal regard. That's the way I lean. And really, it is a challenge of the linguistics that we use in this role and others. People hear human services and they think they have their preconceptions of what it is, right? But also, not many people really understand what human services is or how big the field is, right? Many
Yes.
professionals, I bet if you walked up to a firefighter and like, do you consider yourself a human service professional? Like, no, but you are providing a human service. You're saving lives. So as
Hmm.
far out of the on the the boundaries and outline of the profession goes, there are a lot of people that do a lot of work. that would never consider themselves that. But like you said, we are not HR. There is not, we are not HR. No way in hell. I mean, maybe there's a
Yeah.
tie somewhere in there. I would love, if you're watching this and you are a human services professional also working in HR, please reach out because I'm interested in
Yes.
understanding the tie between the two. I want to get, we can get a little philosophical here, which I think we have the space to do, is talk as far as talking as storytellers. What do you perceive, or how do you perceive our egos and our beliefs of who we are playing into our professional life and just, the way we serve others in general?
Mm. It plays a huge role. And I think in a lot of ways, we're expected to sort of check things at the door, or, put that hat when you get to work. You're putting on a different hat. And when you get home, you're a totally different person there. And we're expected to really separate those things, which of course is really difficult to do. And I think anyone who is in working at all, like in literally any field, can say, I've seen people not check their ego at the door, and that's impacted the work we're doing in different ways. Um, but I also think it's sort of like it's a bit impossible to separate that away from yourself, um, like completely. And despite it being really hard to do, maybe the phrasing in my mind shouldn't be, check something at the door or leave it at home, but it's more so, what can I do to self-soothe myself so that I can come into this space and not put my own personal things onto other people. And I think that's something that not everyone is maybe practicing, that continuous self-awareness, because we're bringing a lot of personal biases into the job, and particularly when we're talking about like cross collaborating between different organizations or different institutions, there's a lot of ego there of who's doing it the right way, who has the jurisdiction over certain things. And then the personal issues of maybe I don't really like this person that much, but this isn't about our personal relationship. It's about something bigger. But those are the issues that I see with bringing our ego and our own sort of like baggage and what's going on with us into collaboration. Is it can make it really hard to cross collaborate, when you have an ego about your organization being better or your methodology being better. Where I really agree with you that I think the more that we can come together, like the better of a job we'll do, and the more we can abandon some of that I'm doing it the right way, like ideology.
Absolutely. You know what? I think the phrasing should be changed. I don't think it should be what am I bringing to the table. I think it should be who am I bringing to the table. Um,
Mm,
and I completely agree. There's the on one end of that spectrum, like people always kind of warn, like, don't bring your work home, because it can be very overwhelming. People burn out. People are overwhelmed, especially like I see social workers as kind of like the example people go to a lot. Like their caseload is just out of this world, literally impossible to cover. That's one side of the spectrum, and then there's the other side where people are like, no, I'm a professional when I go to work and I'm personal when I come home. And I think as human services professionals, we've read the research and we've done the work. The professional or the personal is the professional, the personal is political. And if you haven't read that research paper or that study, I'm going to link it in the bottom where that originally comes from. Uh, I think of religious and as an example of people who don't separate their beliefs from their work. I think of religious
mm,
counselors, people who are specifically providing counseling services that are Christian based or other religious backbone based, because their beliefs are a huge part of the services they provide, right? And that's like every time I think about how ego and our beliefs and identity play into a professional role, like that immediately pops into my brain. And it makes sense because going back to storytelling, how we form our beliefs it starts with a story, either our own or one outside of us that's been given to us. And that guides our decision making. And how do we become professionals? Through our decision making, right? It's essential. Um, I think a lot of people look at human service professionals and say, like, oh, they're also altruistic. It's like, I mean, maybe, but
We
there,
also have our own stuff going on.
yeah, yeah. Like, it's not that I'm just coming to do a podcast and I'm this one way. Like, I am like this when I'm talking to anybody. I'm excited about the work I do. Like, sue me, right? And I think that's why we really have to start advocating, individuals like us, including artists and civil leaders, to help others understand under in the field and outside the field. Like, storytelling is literally where everything starts when it is used appropriately and when direction with direction. Uh,
Hmm.
and I think we're quite capable, and we're starting to see that process or that included in the process of opening up. Um, but one thing I think we also need to do is make sure that we are, for lack of a better word, preventing or at least advocating against those who choose storytelling as a weapon, who weaponize storytelling to scare and endanger
Hmm.
rather than being honest with their truth, right?
Hmm.
Politics,
Yes.
again, politics, where public relations people in that profession, oh my God, are they good at writing a script? And
Yeah.
I think that's a very shallow way of using storytelling. It's, again, to the benefit of a single individual or people that have a set of ideas. Um, when you think of the future of human services, how do you presume or expect that storytelling becomes, a significant element in not just what we learn, but the way we deliver our profession?
I see it happening in two ways. I think, at least I hope that art and writing and verbal storytelling just becomes a more natural part of human services, in the efforts to spread awareness about certain topics, in the effort to get your message out there. I want to see less. Data is really important, but I want to see less data and here's what we're doing, and a little more of that, the touchy feely. I'm doing air quotes right now, but that quote unquote touchy feely side, I'd like to see more of that. And I think that we will. I'd like, more writing and art galleries and open mics and songs, even. I'd like to see more of that as a part of what we're doing, and what I'd like to see organizations sort of intentionally take that on as something that they want to participate in. And then I think, we touched on this a little bit, but I think that it'd be really great in human services if that sort of storytelling element, or the genuine first accounts from people, if we involved those who are most primarily affected by certain political issues or injustices, or those who are most often accessing certain services or going to certain organizations. I'd love to see an uplifting of those people's thoughts, opinions, solutions, and ideas, which I think can very much come in the form of storytelling, because that is a really great way to communicate things. But that's my hope, and sort of like, along the lines of the Yelp reviews of certain organizations or programs. Like, we need to hear more accounts from those who are accessing them and being impacted, and have that be like the driver, like that be the most important voice, out of anyone.
I had to make a note of that because it's absolutely true, especially the part where you say the solutions, right? One of the things that I always argue in the sense of something like that in a cliche way is, if anything that can happen will happen. And I know that's not how the quote goes, but I strongly believe in it anyways. If somebody presents a solution that worked, well, it can be repeated, even if it's adjusted
Mm-hmm.
to meet a certain expectation or specific experience. So storytelling isn't just an expression of, like, here's the problem. It is also an expression or a delivery of the solution. And that
Mm-hmm.
just makes storytelling so much more important because we don't have to rely on just research or proof of evidence,
Yes.
right? To explain away an issue. Like, researchers especially, I think they have a very, very strong potential to not only present their, and some do, sometimes, especially in human service, you will see just how much that research has impacted their lives or how they got to telling it. But in general, research is very blocked off from the, the common folk. It's very hard to understand. I
Hmm.
mean, we understand it because we had to break it down so many times. And a lot of our,
Yes.
viewers are students. And so they're probably like shaking their head like, oh yeah, you understand it because you were taught how to understand it. And I think this is where, like you mentioned, organizations have the greatest potential because they have leaders and those leaders have a great impact. And that impact can be used to teach people that they lead in their communities how to use storytelling because they have the, I don't want to say the authority, I guess. They have the authority to help people understand something in a sense that makes sense to them and is related to whatever they're confronting.
Mm.
So, organizers out there, I'm calling you up to the challenge.
Yes.
How is storytelling incorporated in the not just the advocacy work, but the solution building that you are presenting? So, go show us. you know,
Yes,
um,
please. I'd love to see that. I'd like to hear about that.
right? Absolutely. We are. I can't believe it, but we've already reached over an hour. So,
Wow.
my last question is usually always this, and that is, what kind of message would you like to send to students, professionals, and those kind of coming into the field about storytelling?
I think the message that I'd want to send is to get creative when you're thinking about what you want to do. And in whatever field is most interesting to you, get creative with what that means. And don't think that just because there is a typical path or the most common sort of direction to go in, don't think that that's your only option. And don't think that just because something doesn't exist, you can't instigate it or create it or spark it. I just think like don't let yourself get trapped in a box. Like human services should be ever growing and changing and morphing. If it isn't, I think there's something very wrong with the whole program and the idea. So think outside of the box, and particularly with storytelling, maybe just even think to yourself, what is one way that I can practice storytelling, and then what's one way that I can share that with the work I'm doing.
Spot on. I love it. Hot take. That's wonderful. Yeah, it's great to be at the pinnacle of challenging people to incorporate storytelling. So, and
Yeah.
I'm not only like in all of the work you do, I'm already very proud to also be a partner in a very small niche of people trying to use
Yes.
a direct form of storytelling to do everything that we talked about today. So, and I appreciate, the work that you do, especially. And I already know that we're going to be doing a lot of off-camera partnering together because we need more podcasters.
Yes.
Here's a call to students
Absolutely.
and professionals. Start a podcast. Start a podcast. You will be found. You will be heard. So,
Yeah, we'll find you.
right. We're looking. We're searching. We're we're in all the sub conversations. Like, who would be great, right? So, Jade, thank you
Yep.
so much, and I really appreciate you sitting with us at the round table.
Thank you too. It's been such a pleasure to be here.
Be sure to listen to Dig Deeper, Human Services Field Guide podcast with our guest Jade Phillips, available on Spotify. The NOS conference is right around the corner. Find out more about presentations, booking details, and registration on our website, nationalhumanservices.org.